When you see your wife kissing another man in downtown Houston through your phone's camera, you realize, life will never be the same again. My name is Patrick, and for the last 5 years I was married to Lora, a woman I considered my destiny. She worked as a TV host on a local channel in Austin. I was a web developer, and I spent most of my days behind a computer, writing code for complex projects. We lived in a cozy apartment. Our income allowed us to feel comfortable, though we were far from wealthy. Middle class, stability, predictability. Everything started normally. Lora received an assignment to interview a popular journalist blogger named Oliver. He specialized in social issues, had hundreds of thousands of followers, and was considered an influential figure in Texas media circles. She came home that evening excited, talking about what an interesting conversationalist he was, how easy it was to communicate with him. I just nodded then, focused on a project deadline I had to meet in 2 days. The next few weeks she mentioned him more and more often. Oliver said this, Oliver recommended that. I didn't pay attention. Code had completely consumed me, new orders, complex algorithms, sleepless nights in front of the monitor. I didn't think I would ever tell this publicly, but it was precisely my obsession with work that gave her the space for what happened next. One spring morning Lora asked for my phone. Hers had died and she needed to make a call. I gave her mine but remembered that she had taken photos last weekend that I wanted to send to myself. I took her phone from the table. She always unlocked it with a simple password, our wedding date. I went into the gallery and saw what I didn't expect. Photos of Oliver. Lots of them. Him and her at a cafe. Him and her at some party. Too close to each other. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out of my chest. I went into the messenger. Correspondence. Long, daily, intimate. Messages that left no doubt about what was happening. I gave her a chance and regretted it. Because if I had just asked then, maybe everything would have turned out differently. Instead, I methodically began forwarding all their correspondence, photos, screenshots to myself. Everything. Then I found the geolocation function in Telegram settings, activated it for her account, and started tracking. I didn't recognize myself. A web developer who had never been interested in espionage suddenly turned into an amateur detective. But I needed to know, how deep had this gone? Maybe it was just an emotional attachment? Maybe there was still a chance to save something? The first time I followed her was 3 days later. She said she was going to a meeting with a producer in Houston. I got in the car and followed, keeping a safe distance. She stopped at a mid-level hotel on the outskirts of the city. 10 minutes later, Oliver pulled up in his gray sedan. They hugged at the entrance. Went inside. I sat in the car for 2 hours. When they came out they looked happy. This is the place, the moment where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because that's when I realized, this wasn't flirting. This was a real affair. The next 3 weeks I collected evidence. Tracked their meetings, photographed them at cafes, near movie theaters, again near those same hotels. They did everything that Lora and I used to do at the beginning of our relationship. Walks, long dinners, laughter. Everything that disappeared when code filled my life and her career began demanding more and more time. I thought it couldn't get any worse, but each new photo broke me a little bit more. The pain was physical. Every morning I woke up and for a split second forgot what was happening. Then reality crashed down like a wave. My wife, the woman I had promised to love forever, was building a parallel life with another man. And the worst part? She was doing it so naturally, so easily, as if our 5 years together meant nothing. I started noticing details I had missed before. How she started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. How she began working late more often. How her perfume changed, she started wearing something new, something I had never bought her. How she would smile at her phone screen and quickly hide it when I walked into the room. Each of these small betrayals accumulated, creating a mountain of pain that pressed on my chest, making it hard to breathe. But I couldn't confront her yet. I needed the full picture. I needed to understand if this was salvageable or if I should just walk away. During those 3 weeks of surveillance, I learned more about my wife than in 5 years of marriage. I learned that she loved caramel lattes, not the black coffee she always ordered when we went out together. I learned that she laughed differently with him, more freely, more genuinely. I learned that she touched his hand across the table in a way she hadn't touched mine in months. One evening I followed them to a small Italian restaurant in Houston. They sat in a corner booth, illuminated by candlelight. I sat in my car across the street, watching through the window like some pathetic stalker. Oliver said something and Lora threw her head back laughing. Then she leaned forward and they kissed. Not a peck. A real, passionate kiss that lasted several seconds. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not my heart, that had been breaking slowly for weeks. This was something deeper. My sense of self, maybe. The belief that I knew the person I had married. The trust that had been the foundation of everything we built together. I drove home that night in a daze. Lora came home 2 hours later humming some song. She kissed my cheek, actually kissed my cheek, and asked how my day was. I mumbled something about code problems. She nodded sympathetically and went to take a shower. I sat there staring at my computer screen, wondering who this stranger in my house was. The next morning I made a decision. I couldn't just confront her with what I knew. That would give her a chance to lie, to manipulate, to turn things around on me. No, I needed something more. I needed her to face the reality of what she had done in a way she couldn't escape or rationalize. Over the next week I refined my plan. I documented everything meticulously. Dates, times, locations. I took photos of them together at different places. I saved every text message, every flirty emoji, every "I miss you" and "can't wait to see you again." I created a timeline that showed the progression of their relationship from innocent work friendship to full-blown affair. But I also did something else. I started looking into Oliver's background. Who was this man who had inserted himself into my marriage? What I found was interesting. Oliver wasn't just any blogger. He had built his entire brand on authenticity and honesty. He wrote think pieces about integrity in media. He called out other influencers for being fake. The irony was almost funny. I also discovered that Oliver had been in a long-term relationship himself, though apparently single now. Had he done this before? Was my wife just another conquest? The more I learned, the angrier I became. Not just at Lora, but at this man who presented himself as some paragon of virtue while sleeping with a married woman. One night, about 3 weeks into my investigation, I was going through their messages again. I had read them all multiple times, but I kept finding new details that hurt in different ways. And that's when I saw it. A message from 2 months ago where Lora wrote, "I think I'm falling for you. This scares me but I can't stop." His response, "I know. I feel it too. We'll figure it out. Figure it out." As if I was just an inconvenient detail to be managed. As if 5 years of marriage, 5 years of building a life together, was just a problem to be solved so they could be together. That's when I knew. This wasn't just physical. This wasn't just excitement or escape. She had feelings for him. Real feelings. And that hurt more than anything else. I thought about confronting them separately. Maybe talking to Oliver first, man to man. Or maybe sitting Lora down and asking her directly what was happening. But every scenario I played out in my mind ended with me being the one who looked foolish. The betrayed husband, desperately trying to save a marriage that his wife had already abandoned. No. I needed to make them face what they had done. Together. In a way that would shatter the fantasy they had built. So I waited. I tracked them to their usual cafe in Houston, a place they clearly thought was safe because it was far enough from Austin that they wouldn't run into anyone they knew. I watched them settle into their window table, watched them order, watched them lean in close to each other like teenagers in love. And then I walked in. One evening I decided it was enough. They were sitting in a cozy cafe in downtown Houston, at a table by the window. I pulled the car right up to the entrance, went inside and stood by their table. "Lora," I said calmly, "time to go home. Both of you get in the car. I'll give you a ride." Her face turned white as chalk. Oliver looked at her in surprise, then at me. "Who's this?" he asked. "Her husband," I replied. "And you must be Oliver. The journalist blogger. Colleague from work." Lora was trembling. Oliver finally understood the situation, but I had already turned toward the exit. "The car's at the entrance. I'll wait 5 minutes," I threw over my shoulder. They came out in 3. They sat in the back seat together and I drove nowhere, just around the streets of Houston. Nobody spoke for about 2 minutes until I asked, "How long?" "Patrick," Lora began. "How long?" I interrupted. "For months," she answered barely audibly. I looked in the rearview mirror. Oliver looked confused. Lora was crying. "Do you love him?" I asked. She was silent. "Answer," I insisted. "I don't know," she whispered. "I love you, Patrick. But you stopped noticing me. You're at the computer all day, you don't care what's happening around you. And you?" I turned to Oliver. "Do you love her?" He hesitated. "She's special," he finally said. "But I didn't know about you." "Seriously. She said you were on the verge of divorce." I laughed. Bitterly, without joy. "On the verge," I repeated. "Well then. Now we definitely are." But I wasn't done. I had more to say, more to ask. I needed them to understand what they had destroyed. "For months," I said, my voice eerily calm. "For months you've been lying to me, Lora. 4 months of coming home and kissing me goodnight after you'd been with him. 4 months of asking me about my day while planning your next secret meeting. 4 months of making me feel like I was going crazy for thinking something was wrong. Patrick, I'm not finished, I cut her off. The calmness in my voice seemed to scare her more than anger would have. I want you both to understand something. This wasn't just about sex or excitement or whatever you want to call it. You built a relationship. A real relationship with dates and inside jokes and future plans. While I was home working to support our life, you were building a different life with him. I looked at Oliver in the mirror again. And you, Mr. Authentic, Mr. Integrity. You write articles about honesty in media, about being genuine. But you're sleeping with a married woman. Did that ever bother you? Or did you buy into her story about us being on the verge of divorce, so you could sleep better at night? Oliver's face reddened. Look man, I'm sorry. I really didn't. Save it, I said. You didn't ask questions because you didn't want answers. You wanted what you wanted, and her being married was just an inconvenient detail. The car fell silent. Lora was crying harder now, and Oliver looked like he wanted to disappear. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm going to stop this car. You're both going to get out. Lora, you can figure out your own way home, or don't come home at all. I don't care anymore. And Oliver? Enjoy your moment of fame. Because what you don't know is that for the past 3 weeks, I've documented everything. Every date, every hotel, every text message. And I'm going to make sure the people who need to know find out exactly who you really are. I pulled the car over to the curb in a residential neighborhood. Get out, I said. Both of you. Patrick, please let me explain. Lora tried to speak. Get out, I repeated coldly. They got out. I drove away without looking back. That evening Lora didn't come home. And only at the end did I learn the truth. She had spent the night at a friend's place, too ashamed to look me in the eyes. The next morning I started taking action. First, money. I transferred all my savings to cryptocurrency on a cold wallet that only I had access to. Not everything. I left the minimum in the joint account so as not to raise suspicions. But I hid the main part. I knew divorce was ahead, and I wanted to preserve what I had earned through my work. Second, a lawyer. I hired one of the best divorce attorneys in Austin. I showed him all the evidence, correspondence, photos, geolocation records. He nodded and said the case was winnable. Third, and most importantly, what happened after this is worth hearing. I created a fake social media account and started sharing Oliver's story. Without naming names, but leaving enough details that those who knew him would understand who it was about. I talked about an influential blogger who ruins other people's families. I added some general photos from public places. Oliver's followers started noticing. Questions multiplied. His reputation began to crack. But I didn't stop there. I went deeper. I found forums where people discussed media ethics. I found Facebook groups for Austin journalists. I carefully, anonymously, started planting seeds of doubt about Oliver's integrity. Has anyone noticed that Oliver seems to preach one thing but do another? Interesting how someone who writes about authenticity isn't very authentic in his personal life. I watched as the whispers grew louder. Some of Oliver's sponsors started asking questions. His comment sections filled with skeptics. His carefully crafted image of the honest truth-teller began to crumble. In parallel, I contacted the management of the TV channel where Lora worked. Not out of revenge motives, at least not only for those reasons. I said I had information about a violation of the ethical code. A host was having a romantic relationship with a program guest, which could affect journalistic objectivity. I provided evidence. After this moment, her life was no longer the same. A week later, she was offered to take a break from broadcasting. Lora tried to talk to me. She called, texted, came to the apartment. I didn't respond. The lawyer handled the case and I just waited. Oliver also tried to reach out, wanted to explain everything. I blocked him everywhere. The divorce lasted 3 months. The court divided the property equally, we sold the apartment and split the money. You won't guess how this all ends. Half of what I had hidden in crypto officially didn't exist. So I kept significantly more than she got. The lawyer did his job flawlessly. During those 3 months I focused on rebuilding myself. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma. She helped me understand that while I wasn't blameless, my workaholism had contributed to the distance between Lora and me. The choice to cheat was entirely Lora's. I could have been a better husband, but she could have been an honest wife. I also started going to the gym. Not for revenge body purposes, but because I needed to feel strong again. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd be there, pushing weights, running on the treadmill, forcing my body to feel something other than emotional pain. The physical exhaustion helped. It gave me something to focus on besides the endless loop of questions in my head. Why wasn't I enough? When did she stop loving me? Could I have prevented this? Should I have seen the signs earlier? The therapist told me these questions were natural but ultimately unproductive. You're looking for logic in an emotional decision, she said. People cheat for complex reasons that often have nothing to do with their partner. Sometimes they're running from themselves, not from you. That helped somewhat. But it didn't erase the nights I'd wake up reaching for someone who was no longer there. It didn't stop the moments when I'd see something funny and instinctively turn to share it with Lora before remembering that she was gone. It didn't heal the wound of knowing that the person I trusted most in the world had been living a double life. But the most interesting thing happened afterward. Oliver broke off all contact with Lora. It turned out the scandal around his name damaged not only his reputation but also his sponsorship contracts. He blamed Lora for not telling him the truth about her marital status, and that because of her he had lost his audience's trust. She was left alone, without me, without him, without the job she loved. I learned this from a mutual acquaintance who ran into Lora at a coffee shop. Apparently she looked terrible, exhausted, defeated. The friend said Lora had asked about me, how I was doing. When told I seemed to be doing well, Lora had just nodded and looked away. Part of me felt vindicated. The plan had worked. They had both lost things that mattered to them. Their fantasy romance had collapsed under the weight of reality. But another part of me just felt empty. Because no matter how much they suffered, it didn't undo what had happened. It didn't give me back the 5 years I had invested in a marriage that turned out to be built on sand. I didn't feel satisfaction. There was no triumph of revenge. There was only emptiness. I moved to a new house, hired a psychologist, and started recovering. Slowly, step by step. Code no longer occupied my entire life. I learned balance, which I was never able to find in marriage. The new house was smaller but mine. Every piece of furniture I bought myself. Every decoration I chose. It was strange at first, making all these decisions alone. Lora had always been the one with opinions about curtains and throw pillows. But slowly I started to enjoy it. This was my space, my fresh start. I cut back on work hours. I started saying no to projects that would require 60-hour weeks. I joined a book club, took up hiking, learned to cook more than just pasta and frozen pizza. I was building a life that was fuller, more balanced than the one I'd had before. And then, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I met Sarah. She was a graphic designer at a company I was consulting for. We started talking about a project, then about movies, then about life. She had been through a divorce too. Her ex-husband had gambled away their savings. We understood each other's caution, the walls we had built around our hearts. Our first date was simple: coffee at a bookstore cafe. We talked for 3 hours. On the second date, I told her about Lora. Everything. I expected her to run, to decide I was too damaged, too broken. But she just listened, and when I was done, she said, "Thank you for trusting me with that. I can see it still hurts, and that's okay. We all carry scars." That moment was transformative for me. Someone had listened to my pain without judgment, without trying to fix it or minimize it. Sarah understood that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be harder than others. She didn't see me as broken. She saw me as someone who had survived something difficult and was choosing to move forward. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully. Neither of us wanted to rush. We had both been burned before and knew the importance of building something solid. Sarah was patient when I had bad days, when memories of Lora's betrayal would surface unexpectedly. She never compared herself to my ex-wife or asked me to just get over it. She gave me space to heal while showing me what a healthy relationship could look like. We established clear communication from the start. If something bothered us, we talked about it immediately. If we needed space, we said so without guilt. We checked in with each other regularly about how we were feeling, what we needed, where we saw things going. It was exhausting at times, this level of honesty and vulnerability, but it was also liberating. There were no games, no hidden agendas, no secrets festering in the shadows. Sarah introduced me to her friends slowly, and I did the same. We wanted our social circles to merge naturally, not forced. Her friends were kind and welcoming, never asking invasive questions about my past. They accepted me as Sarah's partner and let me prove myself through my actions, not my history. One evening, about 8 months into our relationship, Sarah and I were cooking dinner together in my kitchen. Music played softly in the background, and she was telling me about a difficult client at work. I was chopping vegetables, occasionally making jokes that made her laugh. And suddenly, I realized I was happy. Genuinely, deeply happy in a way I hadn't been in years. The realization hit me so strongly that I stopped chopping and just looked at her. She noticed and asked what was wrong. I told her I was just grateful for her, for us, for this moment. She smiled, walked over, and kissed me softly. "I'm grateful too," she whispered. That night, as we ate dinner and talked about our days, I understood something crucial. The best revenge against those who hurt you isn't destruction, it's building something better. Lora and Oliver had taken something from me, yes. But in doing so, they had also freed me to find something more authentic, more aligned with who I wanted to be. A few months ago, I accidentally saw Lora at a supermarket in Austin. She looked tired, aged. Our eyes met for a second. She wanted to say something, but I just walked past. But this time I paused. Not for long, maybe just half a second longer than necessary. And in that half second, I realized I didn't hate her anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just indifferent. She was a person who had once been important to me but wasn't anymore. Like an old friend you've grown apart from, except with more pain in the history. I saw her see me with Sarah a few weeks later. We were at a farmer's market. Sarah was laughing at something I'd said, and I had my arm around her waist. I saw Laura's face from across the crowd, the recognition, the pain, the regret. And I felt nothing. Maybe a little bit of sadness for what we'd lost, but mostly just gratitude that I had moved on. Sarah noticed my distraction and followed my gaze. "Is that her?" she asked quietly. I nodded. She squeezed my hand and said, "Do you want to leave?" I shook my head. "No. I'm exactly where I want to be." We continued shopping, Sarah occasionally glancing at me to make sure I was okay. I was more than okay. I was free. Free from the anger, the resentment, the what-ifs that had plagued me for so long. Lora was a chapter in my life that had closed, and I had written new, better chapters since. Later that evening, Sarah asked me how I really felt about seeing Lora. I told her the truth, that it hadn't hurt the way I thought it might. That I felt peace more than anything else. Sarah smiled and said she was proud of me, proud of how far I'd come. Did she love me? Probably, in some way. Some part of herself. Did she love Oliver? No. It was just an escape from reality where we both stopped making effort. But I couldn't forgive. And I didn't want to. The truth is, the affair wasn't what destroyed our marriage. Our marriage was already dying. I was drowning in work, she was lonely and unfulfilled. We had stopped communicating, stopped prioritizing each other, stopped being partners. The affair was just the final nail in the coffin of something that was already dead. Could we have saved it? Maybe, if she had talked to me instead of turning to Oliver. If I had noticed she was pulling away instead of burying myself deeper in code. If we had both been honest about our unhappiness instead of letting it fester. But we didn't, and that's a regret I'll carry forward. Not the regret of losing her, but the regret of not fighting for us before it was too late. Still, I don't excuse what she did. There's never a justification for betrayal. If she was unhappy, she should have left. If she wanted to explore things with Oliver, she should have divorced me first. The lying, the sneaking around, the gaslighting when I asked if something was wrong, that was her choice and it was wrong. Now my life is different. I'm with someone who understands the importance of balance between work and personal life. We're building something new without lies and betrayal. And Lora and Oliver remain in the past. Two people who lost everything because of a short-term affair and an inability to tell the truth. Trust is the foundation. When it crumbles, the house falls. And everyone who was inside will have to pick up the pieces. I still think about those nights sometimes, sitting in my car watching them through cafe windows. The pathetic sadness of it all. But I also think about where I am now, in a relationship built on honesty, with a partner who communicates instead of strays, in a life that I've consciously built rather than one that just happened to me. The revenge I took wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making them face consequences. Oliver lost his reputation because he preached integrity while practicing deception. Lora lost her job because she violated professional ethics. These weren't punishments I invented, they were natural results of their actions. And me? I lost a wife but gained clarity. I lost 5 years but gained wisdom. I lost trust but gained standards. In the end, maybe that's the real revenge. Not destroying them but building something better from the ashes of what they burned down. Looking back now, almost 2 years since everything fell apart, I can see the full picture. The person I was then, obsessed with work, disconnected from my wife, living on autopilot, needed a wake-up call. I just wish it hadn't come in such a painful form. But pain is often the catalyst for growth, and I grew more in those 2 years than in the previous 10. Sarah and I recently moved in together. It was a big step for both of us given our histories. But it felt right. We're building a home together, not just sharing a space. We have weekly check-ins where we talk about how we're feeling about the relationship, what's working, what needs adjustment. It might sound clinical to some, but to us, it's essential maintenance for something we both value deeply. I've also reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage. They welcomed me back without judgment, happy to have me present again. I realized how much I had isolated myself, how much I had let work consume everything. Now I make time for the people who matter, for hobbies that bring me joy, for moments of stillness where I can just be. As for Lora, I heard through the grapevine that she eventually found work at a smaller station in a different city. She left Austin, perhaps to escape the memories or the judgment. I hope she found some peace, some understanding of what drove her to make the choices she did. Not for her sake, but for mine, because holding on to anger toward her would only poison my present. Oliver's career never fully recovered. His follower count dropped significantly, and his credibility in media circles was permanently damaged. I don't take pride in that, but I don't feel guilt either. He made his choices and consequences followed. That's how the world works. The biggest lesson I learned from all of this is that relationships require active participation. You can't coast on autopilot and expect things to work out. You can't bury yourself in work and assume your partner will wait forever. You can't take someone's presence for granted and be surprised when they leave. But I also learned that betrayal is never the answer. No matter how neglected you feel, no matter how lonely or frustrated, there are honest ways to handle it. Go to therapy. Leave if you must. But don't lie, don't cheat, don't build a secret life while pretending everything is fine. The damage that causes, to yourself and to others, is immense and lasting. I'm grateful for where I am now, even though the path here was painful. I'm grateful for Sarah, for her patience and understanding. I'm grateful for the therapy that helped me process everything. I'm grateful for the friends who stuck by me. I'm grateful for the lessons learned, even though they hurt to learn. And sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about that moment in the car with Lora and Oliver. The moment I confronted them with the truth of what they'd done. The moment their fantasy shattered against the hard edges of reality. It wasn't satisfaction I felt then, and it isn't satisfaction I feel now. It's more like closure. The ending of one story and the beginning of another. Life moves forward. Wounds heal, though they leave scars. People change, grow, adapt. And somewhere in Austin, in a new house with a new partner, I'm building a new life. One based on honesty, communication, and mutual respect. One where I'm present, engaged, and committed to not repeating past mistakes. That's the real victory. Not revenge, but renewal. Not destruction, but reconstruction. Not looking back in anger, but looking forward with hope. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. The screen now displays a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.